Hello. Welcome to HR Huddle. I'm Tamera Loerzel, and with me is my partner, Jennifer Wilson. We are glad to be with you today. Although we have maybe not so happy topic that we thought we should talk about. And it's a little personal. Jennifer and I were talking, maybe it's a little bit selfish why we want to talk about this. But we think that, most people are probably dealing with something in our lives. And there's seems to be a lot of grief around us. We were just talking about different ways we're grieving people, and there's just been some deaths, in our family. And my husband is actually dealing with his second death of an employee, which is crazy and unheard of at work. And then my daughter's best friend worked for the senator that was just shot here in Minnesota. So there's grief and loss and probably fear around that. There's grief around aging parents. Both Jen and I have aging parents that we are, dealing with, and the changes in them and our relationship with them, and grieving what used to be and what will probably not be anymore. And so we just thought we should probably stop and first heighten awareness that there is something probably going on with everybody. We've got a couple team members that have, lost, significant people in their families in the last month and last week. And we just don't know what that's going to look like. And we don't know how it's going to unfold. It's unpredictable. Our feelings about it, our reactions about it are different. And we don't really talk about it at work. And, Jen, maybe you can talk about this more, but you were saying that there's this kind of maybe old school way at work to say we still need to hit our numbers. We still need to produce our deliverables. We still need to meet the client deadlines. And as HR professionals and talent leaders and the people in our business, we have to say, yes, and how do we, facilitate both and take care of our people so we can meet all of those commitments?
Yeah, Tamara, it's big. And it's, it is dark, and it's, we mostly want to focus on cool, fun, innovative, growth oriented, positive things in life. That's what most of us want to do. And we really want to avoid uncomfortable subjects like grief. So in the workplace, one of the ways that our forefathers, and I guess some foremothers, handled it was to step over it, deny it. Really, when Tamara and I were both coming up, when we met, when we were kids, it's in our work. You weren't allowed to take a personal phone call at the place. So leave yourself at the door, walk in there and act like a totally different person. And you better have no problems today, miss. And, she and I worked hard at not having too many problems. And if we had them, we colluded with others to try to help us get the phone calls through and to, manage our lives and our spouses and children and all that stuff in this place that had no tolerance for it. And that was not an abnormal place. It was a normal place. That's how it was when we were all coming up. Those of us that are in this, older Gen X, younger baby boomer era. So unfortunately, a lot of the existing leaders of firms today are still kind of managing from that, as much as possible. Yes, we care about our people, but, and we want to celebrate their lives and throw baby showers and that kind of stuff. But, grief, that's messy and uncomfy and really hard to know what to do. So let's just try to step over it. And so Tamara and I wanted to sensitize us all to it. We wanted to start with our friends in HR and talent management and talent leaders. You know what we're talking about. And it's sometimes grief from death. So that's the first place most of us go with the word grief, as we go, well, death, death of a family member. And most firms have a bereavement policy. They might specify what level of family member constitutes allowable time off for grief or whatever. And so it's good if you have a bereavement policy. It's good that it's pretty liberal. And some firms are so cool that they allow bereavement for pets, because that's a form of grief. If you lose a pet, it depends on your level of attachment. But I know in my house, I have at least a husband and one of my daughters that would have to take some considerable time off if when and we lose our dog, who is luckily 2 years old, and hopefully we'll keep her safe. But their attachment is mammoth. So, but grief doesn't just come from death. It comes from a lot of things. And it does come from, as Tamera said, change. Change can cause grief. So I would argue some of you have grief in the workplace because your people are grieving the old logo you used to operate under. I'm serious. They're grieving the old firm, the firm it used to be before we merged, or before we were bought, or before, PE invested, or before whatever, before we grew even. Now, maybe our logo didn't change at all, but we liked it smaller, or, so there's all kinds of different grief. And Tamera and I both have a friend on Facebook, and he posted about getting his father's desk from his mother. Father's passed, and now the desk has been passed to him, and how powerful getting was, and how it brought back this whole flood of feelings, both grief of the loss of his father, but also sort of I'm going to call it changing the yoke or the harness from his to him to leave family. And he overwhelmed with it. And when I read it, I cried a little for him and with him. He out the grief in public social media, and I was proud of him for being vulnerable and sharing it, because so many of us feel it, and feel it in different ways. And so sensitizing, I think that's number one. Number two is not denying it. Not allowing corporate feel to step over it like it was dog do or something, and let's try to avoid it. We're not going to turn you into grief counselors. Tamera and I would not advocate that, but we would advocate knowing who the grief counselors are in your area. And if you don't have an employee resource program that automatically has those kinds of things to offer, figuring out who you might be able to refer people to, and whether there are support groups, grief support groups, and there are, that people could go to. And, like there are people grieving because somebody they love has dementia, or they're grieving because they've lost a baby, or, grieving because their parent is ill with a terminal illness, or somebody else in their family is. And, Tamera, when she brought up the subject today, she said, I just have a lot of it. It's all over the place. It's all over me. It's in every corner. And it's not all Tamera's grief, but it's other people's grief. And that weighs. So I guess don't deny it, and find grace for it. Those would be a couple of things we would say.
Well, and around the grace, I would add some flexibility to allow it to unfold, because people don't always know what they need. And in the case with my mom, and I know with your dad, we can try to plan doctor's appointments or caregiving, but then the unexpected happens. Or, the passing of a loved one. And, a colleague of ours is, managing an estate, and that we don't know what that's going to look like, or what that is going to demand, both time, emotionally, headspace, communication. And, so it's hard, I think, for people to tell us what they need in the moment, and they don't always know the full picture. It's going to unravel. And so your bereavement policy might cover a funeral, but what else around that are they, going to need, or how can we support them? And then what's expected, because we do still need to run a business. We still need to manage clients. We still need to make sure we're there for our team. So what's expected around communication, back or upwards, if you will, or to HR or to their manager, so that, there's not surprises, or so that you're MIA and we don't know what happened. So we can coordinate and plan around that. And so I think that's part of it too. If we open up the dialogue, then we have the ability to have that two-way communication. And, they have a place that they can communicate what they need as it arises, or as they learn, what they might need to do.
Depending on the severity of the circumstances, or how serious the blow to life is for the person, we probably want to make sure that somebody is taking the role of shepherd for the person who has disclosed their situation, their grief situation, the thing that is causing some form of trauma in their lives, that somebody on our team is going to be their primary interface. So they don't feel like they have to inform everybody of everything. They're not feeling like multifaceted communications responsibility, that somebody else on the team is going to take that role for them. Also, though, that somebody's coming up beside them with the intention to be, I'm going to use a word from my faith, pastoral, to be a space for them to express what's happening and give updates, and an interested party who's necessarily, again, getting in there for grief counseling or trying to like take the whole load, but to really be there and care and be interested and say, how are you really? And not overly pushy about what's happening now, but regular, just say, are you really? And see if they want to say, here's where it stands, or give updates, so that there's one person we can look to on the team that might know. And that way they're not getting pestered from all sides about how it's going. I went to church yesterday, and I hadn't been since my dad started having this latest decline. And it was hard, because so many people wanted to come and ask and talk to me about it. And it's easier not to talk about it sometimes. It's easier to sort of give one person the update and say, hey, you can distribute this update. Yeah, but I'd rather not, like deal with everybody. Sometimes for me, if you show me too much love and compassion and too much like empathy, and you well up and all that business, I'm toast. I'm fine if you don't. You know what I mean? I can shoulder it pretty good, but too much squishy on me, and I'm gonna puddle up, and I don't want to in public if I could help it. It's good to like say to in my case, the priest, here's the update, pass it on, so that I don't have to do that. I don't have to spend the whole time. And that's another thing to just think about at work, that not everybody's, like angling for an update from the poor person. They're not able to be productive while they're working because they're so busy having to tell the story and whatever. And of course, you don't want to disclose their story without permission, so we're not advocating that by any stretch, but just to look at that part of it and to try to encourage those around them to hold back, to just say, I'm here if you need me, kind of a thing.
Well, and that's a good point on the communication, is you have to agree on what to say and not say. Everybody has a different level of privacy, and part of what they want to share, and so we need to understand that, and we can help them navigate that too. So I think that's important. And Jen, you were talking about other kinds of grieving, like around the company losses, people changes, or people leave, or people even people get promoted, they're not on my team anymore, this isn't how we worked. And you could just say, like, that's just business, right? But when we're developing relationships, and we've got ways that we're working, and we've got things that we're expecting to be happening in our lives, and then they're not, that's a loss. And so change communications, which I know we've talked about again, and maybe it's time to do that one again in an upcoming HR huddle. But how do we help communicate around those things? So and like we said, we just wanted to make sure we sensitized everybody to it. We're feeling it, and we're watching it and seeing other people experiencing it. And it's not something that we often talk about at work. It's not something that we often visit. We deal with it when it happens. And there might be some places to check in. How are people? Sensitize your people managers to it, and find out what's going on with them. What are they dealing with? What support do they need? Otherwise, they're going to make it up over there and could be feeling like they're acting weird, and we don't know what's going on. And there's things that we could be doing to support people.
For sure. And Tamera, when you and I worked together, I lost both my grandparents, and my boss was like, he didn't want me to go back for the funerals and stuff. He's like, really, he didn't understand who they were to me.
Right.
It didn't matter really. But like I made the decision during that year that I would leave. And, I just was like, I'm not staying here for somebody who cares that little for me when I've given this much. And he ended up leaving at the end of the year. And so I didn't have to for a couple more years. But, that's the kind of effect that the feeling that you aren't really cared about
Right.
can have. So we do want to put our, our interest where our slogans are in HR and in leadership. We care.
Yeah.
And we're going to see what we can do to support our people through these challenging times in life.
Yes. Yes. So we welcome any questions or thoughts about this subject or anything that you've been doing within your firm or organization to help people navigate these times and navigate grief. So we will be back again next week, and we look forward to it. We hope you have a great week. Thanks for being with us live or following the recording, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.